All right, this is a hands-on demo of Biff, which is a web framework for Clojure. It's kind of a follow-up for a workshop that I did earlier today for the Clojure conference, but I thought I'd just provide a more streamlined video for uploading. So I'm going to cover three parts. So first, we're going to go through Biff's getting started flow, so you can see how to get the project or get a Biff project running on your computer. Stage two is I'm going to demonstrate deploying that to DigitalOcean. And then the final step, which I didn't get to in the workshop at all, is I'm going to demonstrate adding a new feature to Biff so you can see, an example of working with the code. Anyway, so let's just jump in. So this is the Biff documentation, which is where you'll want to start out. Findka.com/Biff. And as far as background information for Biff, I will leave that out here, but you can read this introduction section, and also the overview section provides a pretty good background to Biff. Also, the talk I gave for the Clojure conference, I will add a link for that soon under resources. It's not here at the moment, but later you should be able to watch that too for some more background information. Anyway, so now to jump into it, we'll need to run, excuse me, we'll need to run this command to get Biff going. So I'll just copy that now. And let's see, let me make my terminal a little bit bigger. So just paste that command into the terminal and run it. The first time you run it, it'll likely take a little bit of time because it'll need to download all the Clojure dependencies. It's faster for me since I've run it before. Anyway, so once that goes, it'll have a little interactive wizard here. And it'll ask you a few questions. So the first question to ask you is project type. So there are two types of projects you can have with Biff. One is a single page application, which is the default. It includes ClojureScript, React, and things. But since not every application needs to be a single page application, there's also a multi-page one, which just uses server-side rendering. And this one, it basically just leaves some stuff out. There's nothing that's in the MPA template that's not also in the SPA template. So we'll just do that for now. And let's call it example. And we'll just stick with example.core for the namespace. And since I am going to deploy this, I will pick an actual name. Let's call it example123.jacobbrand.com, just to make sure it's a domain I haven't used before. Okay, so now that that's set up, there's a few commands that you'll need to run it locally. And before I get too far, I should remember, FYI, the Java version I have is, so it's 1.8. And Node, which we're about to run, is this, because we did have some issues in the workshop with, for some reason, more recent versions of Java are not working on Biff, and so I'll need to look into that. But FYI, the information is there. So now getting back to this, let's just follow those commands. So we've made a new example folder with our project. And here's the list of files that are added to it. I won't go through this here, but you can go through it on your own, and there's some pointers that I'll show you later. Anyway, so actually, let's commit that. Okay, so now the next command is init. So this is a command you need whenever you set up a new Biff project, or if you clone the project on a new machine, you'll need to run this command. At the moment, all it does is install some NPM dependencies, so React, ClojureScript, and a couple others. Okay, So now that is done. So the final command we need to run is task dev. And so this will start our application. It'll start up the JVM. Okay, so once you see system started, then it means the application is running. So we've had another block of instructions that are printed out for how you can access the application. So the first thing we need to do is compile the Clojure script code. So if you go to this URL, this is the console for Shadow Clojure. And so you just hit start watch, and then we can go to the dashboard to see the progress. And so we'll need to wait until this says that the compilation is finished. Okay, so compilation is completed. So now the build has finished. So now we can go to this URL, and this is our application. So the first thing you'll see is this little sign-in form, and we'll hit sign in. Now, normally in a Biff app, when you sign in, it'll send you an email, and then it'll have a link. And so to sign in, you click the link, no passwords or anything. In development, it will just print out a message to the console. So we'll click this button, and now we'll switch to here. And so see, there is a little development message. Here's our email address, and here's our authentication link. So we'll click on that, and now we are signed in. And since our Clojure script code is running, we've got this app. And so you can look through this a little bit. I'll only demonstrate it very briefly. If you open a second window, let's see, I'll open a private window so that I can log in as another user. Let's do DEF. And switch to the console, and here's the new sign-in link. Okay, so we've got two separate users. So you can see if you write a message, it'll show up for both people immediately. Boom. And under here, under DB contents, this is a kind of a debugging message that shows you the contents of the client-side state. So for example, let me send another message. Under messages, we just had that pop up. And so this is the data that backs this part of the UI. Now, under here, we have a few paths in the file system. So for example, source example client app. If you open your editor, source example client app, this will take you to the entry point for the Clojure script code. And so you can explore it through that, and then look at these other files too. And within, if you look at which files are required and things, you can explore your way around. And I have little links to various places that explain more. That's a link to another project. A lot of the links here go to the Biff documentation. So you can learn more about how is the code actually working by exploring through the code, but then also referring back to here, et cetera, et cetera. I'll let you do that on your own. But that, let's see, I believe that is, okay, so that's all we need to do for running the app in development. So the next step that I want to show you is how to deploy the application. So let me close these windows. When you are ready to deploy, go down here to this deployment section in the docs. And the first time you deploy, there's a number of steps you'll have to do. And we will go through this right now. Once you've done this a single time, future deploys are much easier. And we'll show you how that works. Anyway, so let's just go down the list. Step one, set up DigitalOcean. So Again, FYI, Biff is not tightly coupled to DigitalOcean, but it does come with config for DigitalOcean out of the box. If you want to use something else, it only takes a little bit of extra work on your part. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'll just assume you're using DigitalOcean. So if you don't have an account, you'll need to make one. I already have an account, so I'll just sign in here. Let me maximize this window. Okay, and once you have an account set up, you will also need a domain that points to DigitalOcean's name servers. I already have some. If you go to networking domains, so I'm going to use my jacobobrant.com domain. But if you need to set that up, here's a guide. You can look for that. So step 2 is we need to update our configuration. So first of all, need to make sure the host variable is set. Okay, so under config main, there is a Biff host key right here. Excuse me. And since when I created the project, I typed in the domain that I wanted to use. So this is already how we need it to be. But if you did not do that, then this would say example.com, and you would need to change it to something else. Also, in that case, for the change to take effect in the infrastructure configuration, you would need to run this command again. But again, since I set it up when I started the project, we don't need to do that now. So the next step for configuration is another file. So let me show both of them side by side. These are the two main configurations in Biff. So we've got main.edn and task.env. And the difference is that this configuration is given to your app when it is running in production and in development. This configuration is only for when you are running commands in the terminal, like task dev, like we saw earlier, or when you're deploying. So again, there's a host variable here, and this one is already set, so we don't need to worry about that. But we'll also need to set a few more. So let's encrypt email. This is an email address, which when we deploy in production, we'll use let's encrypt to provision an HTTPS certificate. And so if the certificate is about to expire or something, this is the address that let's encrypt will send a message to alert you to that. So I'll just do example at jacobobrant.com. And then the other thing we need to set is a get URL. And I'll do, let's see, so this is the URL for your Git repository that your code will be in. So Biff, when it deploys, it will always pull your code from a Git repository. So you need to have it in a Git repository somewhere. Anyway, so my GitHub username is jacobobrant, and let's do example 123. I don't think I've made a repo with that name already. And the last thing in here I need to set is this DigitalOcean API key. And obviously I don't want to broadcast that to everyone, so I'm going to remove that file and open up a new terminal. And I'll take care of that right now off of the recording. Okay, all done. So let's see, next step. And actually just one more thing. Since I haven't actually set up this Git repository yet, let's do that right now so I don't forget. If you have GitHub command line tool installed, you can just do GitHub repo create. and let's call it example 123. No description, and we're going to do private. You can do public if you want, but if you're doing it for a startup or something, you may want private. And yes. All right. Let me add my personal SSH key to the keyring so I don't have to type my password again. So we've got the GitHub repo connected, and let's do actually the status. Okay, yeah, let's add that. Let's do git push. So I need to set the upstream, so I'll just copy that. Perfect. So now our code is on the Git repo. So this step is all taken care of. Okay, now the next bit. This is a little tricky. So Biff uses two different SSH key pairs. So the first key pair is your personal SSH key, and this is used to SSH into the server in production that your app will run on. And so we need to put the public key someplace where Biff can get it, so that the public key can be installed on the server. Assuming you've already created a personal SSH key, you can probably just type this command, idrsa.pub, and put that in config SSH public key, and we will overwrite. And that's all we need to do for our personal SSH key. Now the next key pair we need is a deploy key. And since our GitHub repository is private, you can only read it if you have access. So we're going to create a key pair that our server will use to authenticate or authorize itself with GitHub. So we'll use this command to generate that new key pair. And yes, we'll overwrite, and an empty passphrase. And so now we've generated it. And the key is in config deploy key.pub. And see, it's right. Actually, let me show you in the editor. So it just showed up right here. So the public key and the private key. And now what we need to do is take that key and put it into GitHub so that anyone with the private key will have read access. So if we go to this URL and change this bit, so example 123, this is the page we need. And if you start out just from your repository page, you just go to settings and then deploy keys. Once here, hit add deploy key, and let's call it default. And now we'll get the public deploy key, and we'll copy that into the form. And we do not need to give write access. And we're done here. Okay, so that's all the configuration we need. So the next step is create an image. So we are going to deploy using Packer and Terraform. So we'll use Packer to first create a virtual machine image, and then we'll use Terraform to create a server with that image. And all we need to do to run the image or create the image is just run this task build image command. And this will take, usually it takes about 5 minutes to run. So we'll just wait for this to finish now. Okay, so the image has finished creating. Took a little longer than usual. Now, if you go into config and go into this task.env file, the image ID for the new image will have been placed inside of there by Biff. I won't show you myself because my API key is in there, but I can show you like this. So this is the new image ID that was inserted there. Okay, so now we've got our image. Let's go on to step 4. So we need to add the production builds for CSS and Clojure script to the Git repo. At some point, Biff will probably be set up for continuous integration, so we'll compile it there, and then Biff on the server will download it. At the moment, it's easy and straightforward enough to just compile those files on your local machine and push them with the Git repo. So the way to do that is just run this build assets command. And it'll compile the CSS first and then the Clojure script. So we'll just wait for this to finish now. Okay, so if we do git status, you can see, actually let me do add. So we've got 3 changes. So some config has been copied over for, this is for the creating the image. It doesn't include any secrets though that we put in the other config file. And here is our production Clojure script and production CSS. So let's commit that and push. And now, so that's step 4. So we're finally ready to deploy. So there's one little prerequisite we need to do. So we use Terraform, and Terraform will manage all of the resources you need to create. And in our case, there are 3 resources that Terraform is going to manage. So 1 is a web server. 2 is the domain, which in our case is jacobobriant.com. And 3 is the A record for that domain. So in this case, example123.jacobobriant.com, which will point to the web server. Now, since I have already imported jacobobriant.com, this resource exists. And so normally Terraform would try to create all the resources that it manages. But since this one already exists, we need to import it into Terraform first. And so we can do that with this command. And I'll change this to jacobobriant.com. Okay, so that's finished. So the next step is Terraform apply. So this command will show us a list of the changes it's going to make, and then we need to confirm. So it's going to make 2 things, our web server and then our A record. So jacobobriant.com and example123 for the subdomain. And this will point, let's see, known after, yeah, so the value, it'll point to the web server. Anyway, and notice it's not creating the domain since we imported that already. So let's type yes and let Terraform provision the server. Okay, so now the server has been provisioned. We can run task logs. Okay, now this is a little bug which happens about half the time. I don't know why, I'll fix it later. But if you see this message, no journal files were found, in fact, I have a little message here, you need to restart the server and then journal files will be fixed. So let's Control-C, run this to reboot the server. And we'll give that 5 or 10 seconds before we try to run logs again. Okay. All right. So we can see the systemd service for Biff is running. And I believe we missed it in the logs, but the first time the server starts up, it will provision a certificate for HTTPS. So I believe that's been taken care of already. And now the app is starting up. So again, since it's the first time, it's going to download all of the Clojure dependencies that it needs there. And it's cloning our app now from GitHub. It got the latest commit. And now the app depends on Biff, so it's cloning that too, and other dependencies. Okay, so once again, we see the system started message. So now we can go to our web browser. And here we are. And so notice HTTPS is set up and we can sign in. And now again, since I don't have email set up, we'll have to get the link from the console. There is email code set up already. So if you want to use Mailgun, all you have to do is put the Mailgun API key in the config, and then it will actually send you an email. But for now, we'll just use the link. And here we are, the working app. And you can get an idea for latency. If we click here, there's about a ½ second delay. At the moment, Biff does not have optimistic updates. So this is the time that it takes for the data to be written to the server and then be sent back to the front end. So anyway, one last thing. So we've done this step. Okay, actually two last things. So next thing is future deploys. So now that we've gone through this whole setup the first time, if you want to make another change, and in fact, let me just make a little example change. Let's go to this static file. So this is where the sign-in form is held. So here's a message, email address, and let's just have it say email address yo. So now if we want to deploy this change, let's see, let's Control-C out of these logs. First, you'll update the Git repository. And then push. And then all you need to do is run task deploy. And this will restart the Biff service on the server. And then when that service, so notice here it says stopped Biff, started Biff. And so now when it comes up again, it will check the Git repo again to get the latest commit. And so since there's a new commit, then it'll have our update. So we'll give this a second to start up again. Okay, so we've got system started. So now, let me close that. So if we go to our app and let's sign out, and there we are. It says, yeah, our update is live. And so that is how you do deployment with Biff. The last step is if you want to clean up. There are two options. Kind of traditionally, you would use Terraform destroy. However, I believe this would also destroy the domain resource, jacobobrand.com, which I don't want to do. So instead of running that command, I will instead just destroy them manually. So if we go to droplets, here's the droplet we created. It's a $5 a month droplet. You can go down here and hit destroy. I actually won't do it quite yet because I want to demonstrate adding a new feature, but I'll show you how you could do it now. So you hit destroy for that. Another resource is under images. The image we created with Packer is right here. So notice this is 17 minutes ago, and you could do delete. And then the final thing is under networking. You can come to your domain and the A record is right here, example 1, 2, 3. And so we could delete that. But with that out of the way, so we've finished our 2 sections now. So getting started in development, deploying, and now I want to move on to a demonstration of how you could add a feature to your application, just to give you a little taste of that. And so I think the feature that I want to add is, let's see, let's log in again. So I want to make a feature, so if, say we have multiple users who have sent messages in here, I want to be able to see a list of the user IDs for anyone who has sent a message since I've entered the app. And then I want to be able to click a button that says yo, and it will send them a private message that says yo. All right, so let's jump into that. Now I closed the development server, so let's just open that again. And we'll wait for this to start up. Okay, so system is started. So let's go, let's see, actually, I skipped ahead. We need to start the Clojure script build. And this time it should not take as long to finish because our old compilation results should be cached. In the meantime, though, we're already logged in because I never logged out on the example app. All right, and this is finished. And let's just refresh to make sure we've got the latest Clojure script bundle. Okay, so, and let's open another user because we want to be able to see other people who have sent messages. All right, I am ABC. I am DEF. Okay, so now I've got this here. And if we go into our DB contents, again, so under the messages table, we have 2 documents. So there's a document here for I am ABC, and you can see my user ID is here. And for this message, for I am DEF, the user ID is here, this other UUID. So what we're going to want to do is filter through these values and get those 2 UUIDs, and then display them to the user and have a button next to each one that says yo. Except we probably don't need one for our own users, so we could filter out our own user ID. So let's go back to here and let's just put it up here at the top. So into our editor, and it'll be under this components.cljs file. And main is the top level thing here. And we have, so this is our navigation, so tab. So this controls, which tab are you in, and we're in the CRUD tab. So let's go up here. And now here we can see we've got our foo text box and the bar text box. And so let's just put something up right here. If we save the file, shadow Clojure should update that immediately. And there we go, it says hello. Okay, so our client-side state is stored in this db.cljs file. And the main part is this data atom. This is an atom. And this is what is being displayed under DB contents. So if we, let's connect to the REPL. So I'm using Vim with Vim Fireplace, and the nREPL port is on 7888. So connect to that first, And then if I type piggyback app, because app is the name of our Clojure build. And fair warning, I may not be on the latest version of Fireplace. So if this has changed, sorry. Anyway, we are, okay, looks like we're connected. So if I run a command, I can inspect it. Okay, good. It's a little not very formatted well. But let's see if I type data. Okay, so UID messages users. Let's go to messages. Good, and so this is a map from document IDs to documents. So let's get just the documents. Good, so here's one, I am ABC, and then here's the other one, I am DEF. And now we want to get just the user IDs. So let's see, actually, I don't know why I did some, we don't need that. And let's change this to the other threading macro, and then you can do map user ID. Okay, cool. So now we have the list of UIDs, but we want to filter out our own UID first. So let's get that. So if we do data, and let's do keys again. And so again, we've got 3 tables. So UID, this is kind of a special table, and this tells us what the currently authenticated user's ID is. So if we change to this, oops, oh, I need to get rid of this keys. So again, this is a map from document IDs to documents, but this is not a real document. This is not stored in crux. So the key is just nil because there is no actual document key. But we can just do get nil and then get the UID. So it's document with 1 key. And the reason we put it in this structure is just so it's uniform with the rest of the data model. So it's a nice, map from table to document ID to document. Yeah, so if we do UID, we now have our user ID. So over here, let me split this out into multiple lines. We could say, let's just do a filter. And actually, let's wrap this in a let. My UID, and let's put that here. Oops. Okay. And so let's say we're going to filter not equal my UID. We could also just do remove. There's a whole bunch of ways we could do it, doesn't really matter. And now we've got a list of all the people who have sent messages who are not us. So now let's store this. So by the way, this def derivations is a macro, and it's a little fancy, and I will not explain it here. I'll let you just read the code and look into it. But we can create derived values with it. So if we do, let's see, what should we call this? Let's just call it other UIDs. It's not our UID. And let's move it down here so it's kind of with our other derived values. And if we save the file and wait for Clojure, shadow Clojure to run, okay, looks like that's good. So if we evaluate this, we can see this is an atom and it contains a list of UIDs. Perfect. Okay, so now we've got this in our data model. We can move over to the UI and we have imported this namespace DB. So we can display this like so. Let's let's do it in unordered list. Let's see. What actually, okay, so we want to do for, yeah, let's do for UID, and we'll need to use React. So I think I've imported, yeah, React. So this is from Run, and you can use React for any atom. React DB other UIDs. So now anytime this atom changes, then this component will be refreshed. But we've got each UID, so now we can just do list UID. And we may need to do key UID. I'm not sure if that needs to be a string or not, but I'll just do that. And if we're lucky, this will work. Looks like we are not lucky. So what have I done here? What sin have I committed? Let's just look at the error messages, I guess. The above error occurred in the list component. This is, okay, objects are not valid as React child. Okay, I think I maybe know what we did. This is a UID, and maybe this needs to be a string. Okay, that was it. So yeah, the UID was an object, and we can't render those in React. All right, so we've got this, and now we're using Tailwind CSS, which is nice, but it means that it overrides all our default styles, so we don't get nice little bulleted things. But I guess this would be a good opportunity to show you how to look up stuff in Tailwind. So let's search for list. Okay, list style type. I think that's what we need. So list disk. And this will, and I think we need to add some padding if we want it to look normal too. Yeah, so oops. And this was, so we put that on the UL. So let's do, it was list disk, right? Yep, list disk. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, perfect. And let's add some left padding. I'm not sure if I put it here, but let's PL3. Okay, let's do some more. Let's do 6. Let's do a little bit more. Okay, that looks fabulous. Let's say other users. And let's put a little bit of space here. Perfect. And let's put a horizontal line just to make it like really nice and separated. And actually, I'll just replace that with margin. Boom. Okay, that looks nice to a non-designer like me. All right, so now let's add a little button after this. And let's just make it look like a link. So inside of this li, let's see, we can do button. And I'll add the event handler later, but we'll say send yo. And again, Tailwind by default has blank stuff for all our styles. And let's see, let's add a space there. And now let's make the color. In fact, let me just split my screen here so we can stop switching. Okay, so let's change the color of this to, what is it? Is it just blue 500, or do we need to add something else like font color or something? Text color. Okay, it's text. So text blue 500. There. So that looks like. And now let's make it when we mouse over, we want it to be underlined. Hover underline. Perfect. That is beautiful. All right, now let's add a click handler. And first, we'll just do print it to the console. And we'll need to display the console here. Perfect, it's working. Okay, so now let's move to a new namespace, mutations, which is where we write data. And we've imported, required it here as m. So we want to make a new function here called m. Oh, actually, let's do m send yo, and we want to send it to this UID that we've clicked on. So let's make a new function here. And the way we're going to do this is with a Biff transaction. So we can use this as an example. So our foo button, when we click on here, it sends a Biff transaction. And so let's just copy this. Oops, I just clicked something. And so to explain the structure of this very briefly, excuse me, a Biff transaction data structure is a map, and the keys are what I call idents, which I've kind of stolen this from Fulcro. But in an ident, you have two elements, and the first element is a table. So this transaction does users, but we are going to want to make a new table for yos. Maybe that should have an E, I don't know, yas. So we'll have to define this table on the back end later, but for now we'll just structure it like this. And the second element is the document ID. So in some cases you want to explicitly set the document ID, like in this case, we're adding the foo attribute goes onto our current user's document. But here we don't care what the ID is. We just want to make a new document, and the ID of it, we want to just be a random UUID, because there's no really unique primary key about a yo. You could send a whole bunch of them to the same person, right? So if we just omit this and have only one element, then Biff will say, okay, I'll create the ID for you. Now the value is the document that you want to set. So in this case, over on foo, we said update true, because we don't want to overwrite the entire user document. We just want to merge this foo attribute into it. Now in this case, we want to create a new document. We're not updating any existing document, so I'll take that out. And instead of foo, probably we want maybe UID, or perhaps, well, let's see. Yeah, this will work well enough. We'll just say a UID attribute. And how about a timestamp? And there's a special value here called db/current time. And so when this document is written, the timestamp attribute will be set by the backend to the current time, right? And sendTX is a function which I've defined up here, and it sends a sente event. So it's kind of just syntactic sugar for, actually, what was it, Biff TX. So yeah, so we can also just do this. An API send is our function that sends sente events, WebSocket events. So that's the event ID, and this is the payload. But we'll just use the sugary version. And that is, I think, everything. Okay, oh, there's an X there. That should be UID. Okay, so that's good. Now let's save the components. Okay, so now we could try to send this, but we haven't set up authorization rules on the backend yet, so it will fail. But why don't we take a look at what that looks like? So we want to send this person a yo. And now we get an anomaly object, and it's forbidden. There's no authorization function for the table yos, for creating a yo document. So great. And I think that also is printed out in the console. Never mind, looks like it is not printed out in the console. But it is printed out here, FYI. So let's close that, and let's move now to our backend. So over here under rules, this is where we define all our data and the authorization rules. So the first thing, it's got two kind of sections. Here we have some specs. And so this will just define the shape of documents that we're allowed to have. So let's create a yo document. And we'll use this only keys. This is like specs keys function, but it's for closed maps. So it can only have a key if we explicitly define it. And let's say required, and doesn't need to be namespaced. We need a UID, and we need a timestamp. And you know something I just realized? We included the destination, like the receiver UID, but we did not add the sender of the UID, which is an oversight. So let's go back to here, and let's open our data model. And so we've got, so this UID value here is the receiver, but our UID is here. So they're both called UID, but it's in the DB namespace. So let's change this to receiver and change this to sender. And this will be DB UID. We could evaluate this. Right, so this is an atom, has our current UID. All right, sender, receiver, timestamp. And let's save. And looks like that saved correctly. Great. So now over here, so we're going to require all three of those keys. Let's see, and these need to be namespaced. So sender, receiver, and timestamp. And we're not going to have any optional keys. Now we need to make sure that these keys also have specs. So timestamp already has one, so it must be an instant or a date object. But sender and receiver are new. So they're basically the same type as this user/ID thing. So we have two options. We could do sender UUID, or we could also do user ID. And it does not really matter. I'll just do UUID, sender and receiver. Okay, so that is the spec. Now under rules, so this section defines what shape is the data allowed to have. This second section defines who is allowed to read that data and who is allowed to write it. So let's make a new table for yos. And first we have to define the specs. So the first element here is the spec for the document ID, which is just a randomly generated UUID. And the second one is for the spec for the document itself, which we just defined. So now we want to say if you are creating a yo document, we've got a few, so session UID is the UID of the currently authenticated user. So it's the person who's sending the transaction. We've also got a doc key in here, which the doc is the state of the document after the transaction. There's also a doc before, which describes the state of the document before the transaction. But we're creating a document, so we only need to look at after. And so we'll say equals our user ID should be the same as the sender. So if this function returns true, then the transaction is allowed. If it does not return, if it returns false or something falsy, then it will not be allowed to pass. And finally, let's see, one more. We want to say query. So you are allowed to query for yos. In other words, you're allowed to read a yo. Let's say, how about if you are either the sender or the receiver, then you can read. So one way we could do that is sender doc or equals UID receiver doc. Alternatively, we could do, well, I won't worry about it. There are other shorter ways that you could write this function, and feel free to do that on your own. But this function will work just fine. And that is all of our authorization rules. So now if we, okay, so I did another connect 7888. And so now we're connected to the nREPL again, but we're not going through piggyback. So we're not, it's not the Clojure script, this is now the backend REPL. And so I'll evaluate the current file. And so now these rules should be in place. So now, if we click this button, it should work. Why did that? Okay, we've got another, okay. I failed you. So what we did now did work. Okay, so we created a yo, but now what this is saying is that a query, so this is a different query, which I recognize because this is fetching the messages down here. And so what this is doing is it's fetching anything that has a timestamp, which is beyond a certain value here. And the horrible mistake I've made is that I added a timestamp on this document here too. So it's getting our yo and it thinks it's a message. So now I need to think about, you know, how can I fix this error? So we've got message. And so a message document must have a timestamp, but it also must have a text field. So why don't we go to here and let's tighten up the subscription for messages. So we'll say, okay, it's got to have a timestamp of a certain value, but it also must have a text attribute. And let's save that. And that has compiled. Okay, so now a small shortcoming of this def derivations macro is that if you redefine a derivation, you've got to refresh the web page. So I'd like to fix that later, but haven't done it yet. So we refresh, the app has loaded, and notice there is no error message here from loading the messages. So I think we're okay. So let's get both users here. Now, since we refreshed, I have it set so it only loads messages that have been sent after you entered the app. So why don't we have this person send another message? Perfect. So now their UID shows up again here. And let's just send them another yo just to make sure. Perfect. No errors. And to verify that the yo is there, why don't we do a query with crux? So let me show you a little pattern that I use. I often create a namespace in my apps called admin.clj, and this is just where I put forms for the REPL. Well, yeah, I'll close that. So what we're going to do here is, for example.admin, we want to require biff.core because there is our system state, which includes the crux node, is stored in the biff.core/system atom. So we'll need that. In fact, why don't we just do that now? So we could do keys and see we've got a bunch of stuff here. And one of these keys is going to be called biff/node. And let's import crux.api. And so let's see, let's get the node. So it's going to be biff/node. And actually, let's do that in like this. Biff node, and then we'll get a DB. Okay, and so now we can execute data log queries. Find a document such that, let's say anything that has a sender attribute on it, because we aren't using the sender attribute for anything else. And let's, well, I'll show you this query now. Okay, so we've evaluated, and we've got 2 values here. Great. But let's add full results. And let's do one more thing. Oops. I need to reevaluate the namespace. Okay, here's our 2 documents. Sender is, that's our UID, and receiver is this other person, and timestamp is different. But we got our documents, so perfect. So these are in, and now all we need to do is, excuse me, is display them in the UI. So let's bring up this one. So, well, I guess both of these users will be able to see those UIs. So now let us go back onto the front end, onto our model here. So we've got our subscriptions, and we want to now add another subscription for yos. And let's see, what is going to be the best way to do this? Table yos, args, let's see, let's say anyone where we are the sender. And notice this looks kind of like a crux query, and this will be converted into a crux query, but it's not quite as powerful. But we can do, oops, this. And one of the reasons it's not as powerful is, oh, actually we could, I was going to say we can't do or clauses. I just haven't added that feature yet. Actually, what I think we could do is, never mind. Forget I said anything. We're going to do 2 separate queries. So we've got, and we want to fetch any yos where we are the sender. And then we also want to fetch any yos where we are the receiver. right? And okay, I think this is gone right. And so remember again, since we updated the value, we'll need to hit refresh. And let's make sure we don't have any issues here. I don't see any. Good. So now let's look at DB contents. Yos, ha ha ha. We've got our new yos right here. So we're in the home run. All we have to do is add those to the front end. So let's go to components. Okay, so we're right here. And what should this look like? Let's see. Let's just put it underneath here. Let's add some space. And let's do a list of just paragraphs. Let's see, we'll get let's just get all the keys. So sender, receiver, and timestamp. Oh, you know, we need to make a new, so what I want to do is to be able to do React DB yos. But that derivation is not there yet, so let's add it. So we've got our data value, which again, remember, data is just this thing. So we want to go data, yos, vals. Oops, okay, so let's connect again. I guess I was already connected, and do piggyback again. Come on. Uh-oh, I did not dereference that atom. I wonder if that's causing it to be slow. I hope running that the first time didn't mess things up. I also wonder if it's connected to this browser now. Let me just close that one. Okay. Uh-oh, we've got something funny here. Okay, something with shadow Clojure. Let me just refresh this whole page. Now we've got something. Okay, I don't know what that is. Maybe that's just an error message from when the old connection was disconnected. But we've loaded that. Let's see if I can connect again. Data, yos, vals. Oh, please don't do this to me. Okay, well, I won't waste your time figuring out why my unwrapple connection won't work, but we can just do this. So I know this will work. So I'll just paste it down here and call it yos. So data, yos, vals, and let's sort by timestamp. And so this will sort by timestamp descending. So newest yos will be first. Let's save that. And looks like we're good. And let's just do a message here that says, let's see, let's just do, this will be ugly since they're UIDs, or UUIDs. I'll do sender, sent a yo to receiver at timestamp. I think that'll work. And let's go back to the CRUD page. And here we are. Now this is exceedingly ugly, but let's put at least a little bit of space. Okay, so again, it's super ugly, but this UID sent a yo to this other UID at this time. Woohoo. And my laptop still thinks that I live in the mountain time zone, which has not been true for a while. Anyway, you could clean this up a little bit and maybe have usernames and blah 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 blah. But I think you get the idea. And just for completion, let's get this other user set up again so we can send each other some yos. Okay, in the console, def. Oh no, why is it? Oh, this is, I was confusing myself by this. These are the logs for a production app. So long ago when I said it didn't show us a error message, maybe it did. Anyway, so here's our link. Cool. So we're signed in. And notice since we are this user, we can see that there are some yos here. Now let's say if we signed in as some other user, the yos do not show up because we are neither the sender or the receiver. So that is working. But now let's go back in as def. Okay, and let's send some messages. Hey, hi. And so now we can send yos to each other. So let's send us a yo. Hoo-hoo. So now, okay, so def is 628, blah, blah, blah. So 628 sent one to 423, and we can send a yo back. And there you have it, a new feature all done. So I won't take your time to deploy this, but if you wanted to deploy, again, now remember, you do, well, first you do task build assets, because we've got some new Clojure script code. So you'll do that to build the Clojure script, and you'll do git add, git commit, and git push, and then you'll do task deploy. And once that's done, the new feature will be in production. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.